What's the worst thing you have ever done? As a kid, I got bullied a lot. I was depressed and wanted to take my life at age 13, so I kind of hoped he'd end me. We'll call him Kyle. Kyle was probably mentally unbalanced. He was a skinny kid who wore half sleeves, had pinhole pupils, and messed up hair. Wiry dude, too. We had a big ox-like guy who didn't mind hurting kids, but wasn't self-motivated, so he usually did so at the bequest of others. Kyle got ox to wail on me a few times, or he held me down while Kyle or one of Kyle's toadies wailed on me. I got hurt a few times, and as I was neglected at home, nobody gave a crap. I just learned to heal, avoid them, or hide until they went home. One day it occurred to me that Kyle never got me alone. I pointed this out to him. He told me he'd end me. I said he didn't have the brains or strength to do it alone. Ox would do it or whatever, because he was weak. Kyle got this look in his eye that let me know I hit my mark. For the next few encounters, I'd say, I see you with Ox. Does Ox know you won't fight me alone? Kyle acted like he didn't care at first, but I could tell it got to him. Kept telling me to shut up, and you're done if I ever get you alone. Even Ox started to lose his spirit, only half hurting me with this confused look on his face. You always do what Kyle asks you to do? You ever thought about hurting him? Ox didn't have answers for that, but it gave him pause. Soon, Ox stopped hanging around Kyle, and every time I saw Kyle, I'd say, alone, Kyle, alone, and he got madder and madder. It was unhinging him. He started to look like he was going to seriously end me, but he was all talk, and I grew confident. Soon, just mouthing, alone, to him got him riled up. I'd also give him long stares at lunchtime, until he would start screaming at me, and when people looked back at me, I was looking out the window nonchalantly. At some point, he had been calling me gay. I finally asked him what that meant, and he didn't have a decent answer. I told him what it meant and said he liked doing it up the butt. Oh, this escalated his rage. I mean, he went from unhinged to hanging by a thread. He started getting a tick in his eye and started pulling at his own arm hair in an OCD reaction. One day, in science class, he was giving me some lip service because he had a supportive buddy with him. At some point, he started throwing paper wads at me. I looked back at him, mouthed, alone, and blew him a silent kiss that ended with a seductive lip lick. He snapped. He didn't just snap, he turned into some wild animal and launched himself at me, screaming some kind of incoherent shrieking like a kid being crushed in a combine. He managed to get within a foot of me, scrambling over desks and throwing everything aside like an enraged baboon before the teacher grabbed him. He stared screeching and clawing at the teacher's face. Luckily the teacher was very tall and had better leverage. It's okay, Kyle. It's okay, let's just go outside in the hallway so you can calm down, the teacher said, and had to carry Kyle's skinny self away like a giant flapping fish. The door closed. We heard more screaming, banging against lockers, and the teacher calling for help. We heard more voices. Some of them were saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." A teacher came in, pale, and told us all to stay in our seats. She closed the door and witnessed the spectacle from the skinny door window. Once in a while, more incoherent shrieking. Minutes later, 2 cop cars and an ambulance drove up. All us kids looked out the window and saw some people cart Kyle away strapped down tightly to a gurney. He was now crying and wailing, like the tail end of a complete nervous breakdown. He was screaming, "I'm gonna end you, I swear, you better watch what is coming to you, watch your back you dimwit," but seemed to be shouting at no one in particular. He had screamed so much, he had become hoarse by this point, and it was really alarming. No one ever brought it up to me because everyone remembered Kyle attacked a teacher. I never got asked about it as I was pretty anonymous at the time, and anyone who didn't know the backstory would have thought I was no more a victim than the other kids tossed aside as Kyle made his way towards me. Never saw Kyle again. Rumor was he was taken to a mental hospital and stayed there for quite some time. Ladies, what's the creepiest thing a guy has done that was meant to be romantic? As a 16-year-old, I worked at a coffee shop in a rough part of town. One day, a young Asian-looking guy came in and ordered coffee. I noticed he was holding jazz CDs in his hand, and mentioned that 2 of my brothers played jazz. That's it. Just one comment to pass the time from when the coffee left the pot until it landed in his cup. It turns out, that was a big mistake. He sat in a corner for my entire 8-hour shift. He didn't say anything more, just watched me. And thereafter, for 2 straight months, every time I worked, he would come in, order his coffee, shakily try to touch my hand while I handed him his change, and watch me for the duration of my shift. Then I left for 5 days to go on a road trip. When I got back, my manager handed me a stack of letters. He loved me, we were perfect together, we were going to make babies together, he was going to take his life if I didn't go out with him. Complete with cartoon drawings of us. Keep in mind that at this point, I had never made conversation with him other than the initial jazz comment. They were very explicit, disturbing letters and I kind of freaked out, ripped them up and threw them in the garbage. That day, he came in and didn't say anything except for ordering his coffee. Then he went to the bathroom for a long time, came out and left. Soon after a customer told me the bathroom needed cleaning so I went to check. Blood and bodily fluid everywhere. He drew hearts on the walls with. At this point, I'm freaking out. My boss didn't take this seriously because he was an old Vietnamese guy with very different values. Later convicted for running a firearm and substance smuggling ring out of the back office. I didn't go to my parents because they were very conservative Christians and would have blamed me for somehow seducing him in my charming puke-colored, buttoned up to the top of my neck uniform. I resolved to just quit the job. The next day, I went in a bit early. There was a group of guys who were doing road maintenance that came in together every day. They were all Guatemalan, loud, and very sweet. I hung out a bit and told them it would be my last day. Then the crazy guy walked in. I have never been so instinctively frightened in my life. I whimpered and jumped behind the largest Guatemalan, and couldn't stop shaking. The crazy Asian guy just stood in the middle of the cafe and stared and stared and stared. The Guatemalans could obviously tell something was wrong, and one of them walked me back behind the counter. I told him everything that has happened. He told me to go to the back of the bakery and not come out until he said it was okay. So I did. When I came out, the crazy guy was gone, and the Guatemalans were all drinking coffee. They said they had talked to him and he wouldn't bother me again. I gave them all free donuts and thanks, and was just so relieved the horror story was over that I didn't think much about it. Then after my shift, I went out the back way to put the garbage in the dumpster. There was a pool of dried blood on the ground. I never asked, and the Guatemalans never told me, but the crazy guy never bothered me again. Did you ever open up about your mental health and it backfired? I was a quiet kid in high school. Joined newspaper because I liked reading and writing. Quickly grew friends with one of the editors. She was going through depression and so was I. I was tired of bottling things up inside, so I decided to spill it all out after a few months of growing close. I told her everything, how I hurt myself, how I could do nothing but lay in bed and hope to not wake up the next day. The works. I begged her not to say anything to anyone, for all the reasons in the world. She told our principal, and they Baker-acted me. I was picked up from home by a police officer to be taken to a ward at the nearest hospital. My brother, already in college and still an idiot, tried to take funny pictures of me being escorted in handcuffs and taken to a hospital via police car. He was intoxicated at the time of doing this and thought it would be a great memoir. Cop pleaded with him to stop being a dirtbag. He didn't. Get to the hospital, and mom shortly arrives. She's pale. She received a call that I may have tried to take my life. I assure her that's not what happened. Eldest sister came. She's in tears and can't get a full sentence out. Assure her I was not having ideations. Create this narrative that I'm okay. Some girl is pulling a prank. I get escorted into the ward. Worst 2 days of my life. I begged in tears to be let go. My grandmother went through the same thing, and after her evaluation, they admitted her for 3 months. I was about to graduate and learning is one of the only things I love in life. This was the nearest I could get to hell. Law generally requires a 3-day stay, but I managed to convince the psychologist to let me go early. Return back to school. Enter newspaper. Awkward. Group of newspaper folks stay after lunch. I start to leave, not wanting to be around them cause I know they know. The teacher stops me, gives me a good heartfelt I hope all is okay. Nod and thank her. She leaves to go take care of some teacher stuff. The rest of the group confronts me and blames me for lying. How could I lie about being depressed? How could I lie about hurting myself? You're just seeking attention. It's best if you stay out of our lives. You're sick. You're disgusting. The girl I trusted Googled the mandatory requirements for a Baker Act. She said if I got out early there was nothing wrong with me and that I was just using my issues to get with her and blamed me for having a crush on her and being a closeted lesbian. Welp, I showed them my wounds, told them to get lost and die. My hatred was flowing deep. I walked away in tears and walked to the principal's office to have me transferred out of newspaper immediately. I clambered to the last few days of high school. I couldn't wait to get away from those people, but they ruined me forever. I can't trust anyone.